Welcome to Psychominds. Here psychology is made simple, clear, and based on science. Anxiety begins in a region of the brain known as the amygdala. This small almond-shaped structure is part of the limbic system and plays a central role in detecting threats and activating the body's survival responses. From an evolutionary perspective, this mechanism was essential for protecting humans from danger. When the amygdala detects something that might represent a threat, it rapidly sends signals throughout the brain and body, preparing the organism for action. This response is often referred to as the fight-or-flight reaction. In a matter of milliseconds, the amygdala communicates with the hypothalamus, which then activates the autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic branch of this system increases heart rate, breathing speed, and alertness, preparing the body to either confront danger or escape from it. Under normal circumstances, this system works efficiently and only activates when necessary. However, in individuals experiencing chronic anxiety, the amygdala becomes hypersensitive. It begins to interpret neutral or ambiguous situations as potential threats. As a result, the brain may trigger defensive responses even when there is no real danger present. Neuroscientific research shows that in anxiety disorders, the amygdala can become overactive while the regulatory regions of the brain, particularly the prefrontal cortex, struggle to maintain control. This imbalance leads to heightened emotional reactivity and persistent worry. Understanding this neural mechanism is fundamental for recognizing that anxiety is not merely a psychological experience but also a biological process involving specific brain circuits. By studying how these circuits function, neuroscience provides valuable insights into why anxiety occurs and how it can be effectively managed. While the amygdala acts as the brain's alarm system, the prefrontal cortex functions as the control center responsible for reasoning, decision-making, and emotional regulation. Located in the frontal region of the brain, this area plays a critical role in evaluating threats and determining whether a situation truly requires a defensive response. In healthy cognitive functioning, the prefrontal cortex helps regulate emotional reactions generated by the amygdala. When a potential threat appears, the prefrontal cortex analyzes contextual information, past experiences, and rational evidence before determining the appropriate response. In many cases, this process allows the brain to conclude that the perceived danger is not actually harmful. However, during states of anxiety, this regulatory system becomes less efficient. Research in cognitive neuroscience indicates that excessive stress hormones can impair the functioning of the prefrontal cortex. When this happens, the brain's rational evaluation processes weaken, allowing the amygdala to dominate emotional responses. This imbalance explains why anxious individuals often feel overwhelmed by fear, even when they logically understand that a situation is safe. The emotional brain becomes louder than the rational brain. As a result, thoughts may become repetitive, catastrophic, or exaggerated. Functional neuroimaging studies have repeatedly demonstrated that individuals with anxiety disorders show reduced activity in the prefrontal cortex and increased activity in limbic structures such as the amygdala. This neurological pattern contributes to persistent worry, hypervigilance, and difficulty controlling intrusive thoughts. By strengthening the regulatory role of the prefrontal cortex through strategies such as cognitive therapy, mindfulness, and emotional awareness training, it is possible to gradually restore balance between emotional and rational brain systems. When anxiety is triggered, the brain activates a complex neurobiological cascade that involves the release of stress hormones. One of the central systems responsible for this response is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, commonly referred to as the HPA axis. This system connects the brain with endocrine glands and plays a crucial role in regulating the body's response to stress. Once activated, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary gland, which in turn stimulates the adrenal glands to release cortisol and adrenaline. These hormones prepare the body for immediate action by increasing heart rate, blood pressure, and energy availability. Adrenaline produces rapid physiological changes such as faster breathing, muscle tension, and heightened alertness. Cortisol, on the other hand, sustains the stress response by mobilizing energy reserves and increasing glucose levels in the bloodstream. In short-term situations, this hormonal response is beneficial. It enhances survival by allowing the body to react quickly to threats. However, when anxiety becomes chronic, the prolonged release of stress hormones can have negative effects on both the brain and the body. Excessive cortisol exposure has been associated with difficulties in memory, impaired concentration, and emotional dysregulation. Over time, chronic stress may also contribute to sleep disturbances, immune system suppression, and cardiovascular problems. Neuroscience therefore emphasizes that anxiety is not limited to mental experiences. It involves a dynamic interaction between brain circuits, hormones, and physiological systems. Understanding these processes helps explain why persistent anxiety can affect multiple aspects of health and well-being. Anxiety does not only affect emotional responses. It can also influence cognitive functions such as memory and learning. One of the brain structures particularly sensitive to stress is the hippocampus, a region responsible for forming and organizing memories. The hippocampus works closely with the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex to process information and store experiences. Under moderate levels of stress, this system can actually enhance memory formation, particularly for emotionally significant events. This is why people often remember stressful or dangerous situations very vividly. However, when anxiety becomes chronic, prolonged exposure to stress hormones, especially cortisol, can negatively impact the hippocampus. Studies in neuroscience have shown that excessive cortisol may interfere with synaptic plasticity, the process that allows neurons to strengthen connections and form new memories. As a result, individuals experiencing high levels of anxiety may notice difficulties concentrating, remembering information, or maintaining focus during learning activities. The brain becomes more focused on detecting potential threats rather than processing new information. In educational and professional environments, this cognitive interference can significantly affect performance. When the brain remains in a constant state of alertness, it prioritizes survival mechanisms instead of complex reasoning and memory consolidation. Understanding the relationship between anxiety and cognitive functioning is essential for developing effective strategies to reduce its impact. Techniques that promote relaxation, emotional regulation, and cognitive restructuring can help restore optimal brain functioning and improve learning capacity. One of the most important discoveries in modern neuroscience is the concept of neuroplasticity. This principle refers to the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize its structure and function in response to experiences, learning, and environmental changes. For individuals dealing with anxiety, neuroplasticity offers an encouraging perspective. Although anxiety can alter brain activity patterns, these changes are not necessarily permanent. With appropriate interventions and consistent practice, the brain can gradually form new neural pathways that promote emotional balance. Psychological therapies such as cognitive behavioral therapy aim to reshape maladaptive thought patterns and strengthen the regulatory functions of the prefrontal cortex. Over time, this process can reduce excessive amygdala activation and improve emotional resilience. Mindfulness practices, meditation, and controlled breathing exercises have also been shown to influence brain function. Neuroimaging studies demonstrate that regular mindfulness training can increase activity in brain regions associated with attention and emotional regulation. Physical exercise is another powerful factor that supports brain health. Regular movement stimulates the release of neurotrophic factors, proteins that promote neuronal growth and strengthen synaptic connections. Together, these findings highlight an essential message. While anxiety can significantly affect brain functioning, the brain remains capable of change and adaptation. Through intentional practices and evidence-based interventions, it is possible to cultivate healthier neural patterns and improve psychological well-being. Here on PsychoMinds, we explain psychology with clarity and scientific responsibility. Subscribe and be part of a community focused on learning and understanding the mind.